There is a moment that finds us all. It may not come in a church, or a temple, or a mosque. It might come on a Tuesday night, as you're driving home from a job you don't particularly love, the streetlights smearing across your windshield like wet paint. It might come as you stare up at a sky so choked with stars that the sheer, crushing scale of the universe makes you feel infinitesimally small. Or perhaps it comes in the dead of night, in the quiet of your own room, when the simple, terrifying thought lands with the weight of an anchor. What if this is it? What if this is all there is? And in that moment, the opposite question, just as terrifying, just as profound, echoes back from the void. But what if it isn't? This is the chasm that has haunted humanity for millennia. The gap between what we can prove and what we suspect. Between the cold, hard data of our senses and the persistent, nagging whisper of something more. For centuries, philosophers and theologians have tried to build bridges of logic and reason across this chasm. Arguments from first cause, from design, from morality. These are the classical proofs, attempts to demonstrate God's existence with the certainty of a mathematical theorem. But today, we are not walking across those bridges. We are going to explore a different path, a more dangerous, more personal, and perhaps more unsettling one. This is not an argument designed to prove that God exists. It is an argument designed to convince you that believing in God is the only rational choice. It is a pragmatic argument, one based not on evidence for God, but on the practical outcomes for you. This is the story of a gamble so immense it makes every bet at every casino in the world look like a child's game. This is the story of Pascal's wager. To understand the wager, you must first understand the man. Blaise Pascal was not a dreamy-eyed mystic or a cloistered monk. He was one of the most formidable intellects of the 17th century. A child prodigy, he was a brilliant mathematician who laid the foundations for probability theory, the very mathematics of chance and risk. He was a physicist who made crucial discoveries in the study of pressure. He was an inventor who created one of the world's first mechanical calculators. This was a man who lived and breathed logic, reason, and evidence. His mind was a finely tuned instrument for dissecting the material world. And yet, this same man, at the age of 31, had a profound, fiery religious experience that he called a night of fire. It shook him to his core. He sewed a parchment describing the event into the lining of his coat and wore it for the rest of his life. The man of pure reason had collided with what he believed to be the divine. This collision created the central tension of his life. How could a rational mind, a mind dedicated to proof, navigate a question that seemed to lie beyond reason's reach? His answer, jotted down in a collection of fragments posthumously published as the Pensées or Thoughts, was the wager. He begins with a stark and unyielding premise. When it comes to the question of God's existence, he says, reason is powerless. There is no lab test, no equation, no logical syllogism that can definitively settle the matter. Reason can decide nothing here, he wrote. We are adrift in an infinite unknown. But, and this is the crucial first step, you cannot opt out. You cannot simply stand on the sidelines and refuse to play. To be alive is to be in the game. You are embarked, Pascal declares. Merely by existing, you are forced to live your life either as if God exists or as if he does not. Indifference is not a neutral position. It is, in practice, a bet against God. The ship has already sailed, and you are on it. You must wager. So, since we are forced to bet, let's analyze the odds like the brilliant mathematician Pascal was. He sets up a simple, devastatingly powerful decision matrix, a grid of potential outcomes. Let's look at quadrant 1. You wager that God exists. You choose to believe. You live a life of faith, virtue, prayer, and charity, as prescribed by the Christian tradition Pascal was a part of. Now, there are two possible outcomes. Outcome A, you are right. God exists. What have you won? According to the theology Pascal inherited, you have gained an eternity of bliss, infinite happiness, a reward so vast it is literally immeasurable, an infinite gain. Outcome B, you are wrong. God does not exist. What have you lost? Well, you lived a virtuous life. You were charitable, you found community, you had a sense of purpose, you perhaps found comfort in rituals and hope in times of suffering. You may have given up certain earthly pleasures or sins, but in the grand scheme of a finite life, this is a finite and arguably negligible loss. You are dead, and that's it. You lose nothing, really. Now, let's look at quadrant 2. You wager that God does not exist. You choose to live a life of unbelief. You pursue your own pleasures and your own path, free from the constraints of religious dogma. Again, there are two possible outcomes. Outcome A, you are right. God does not exist. What have you gained? You have gained the freedom to live your one finite life exactly as you saw fit. You didn't waste your Sundays in church. You indulged in whatever pleasures you wished. This is a finite gain. You enjoyed your brief time, and now it's over. Outcome B, you are wrong. God exists. What have you lost? According to the same theology, you have lost everything. You face an eternity of damnation, of separation from God, an infinite loss. Pascal, the father of probability theory, looks at this grid and sees a conclusion of breathtaking clarity. Anytime you have a bet where one potential outcome is infinite, it mathematically dwarfs all finite considerations. Think of it like this. Imagine I offer you a lottery ticket. Costs $1. There's a tiny, tiny chance you'll win, but the prize is not $1 million or $1 billion. The prize is infinite joy, forever. On the other hand, not buying the ticket carries a tiny, tiny chance of infinite, eternal pain. The rational mind, looking at the sheer scale of the potential outcomes, ignores the $1 cost. It ignores the finite pleasure of keeping that dollar in your pocket. The infinite reward and the infinite risk are the only things that matter. Therefore, Pascal concludes, to bet against God is an act of spectacular irrationality. You are risking an infinite loss for the sake of a paltry, finite gain. To bet on God, however, is the only logical move. You risk a small, finite loss for the chance at an infinite gain. The wager is so lopsided, it's not even a fair fight. To a rational gambler, the choice is obvious. And for a moment, the logic is stunning. It's cold, it's calculating, and it's profoundly unsettling. It bypasses the need for faith and appeals directly to self-interest. But, as you might suspect, it's not that simple. The wager has been attacked from all sides since the moment it was conceived. The criticisms are as powerful as the argument itself. First, and most famously, is the many gods objection. Pascal implicitly presents a binary choice: the Christian God or nothing. But what if the true divine reality is Zeus, who punishes the humble and rewards the arrogant? What if it's Odin, who only values warriors who die in battle? What if it's a deist God who set the universe in motion and doesn't care one bit whether you believe or not? What if the true God will punish you for believing in the wrong God? By wagering on Pascal's God, you might be actively betting against the real one. The wager doesn't tell you which horse to bet on in a race full of infinite horses. Second is the inauthenticity objection. Can you truly choose to believe something? Imagine I offered you $1 million to genuinely, truly believe that the sky is green. You could say you believe it, you could act like you believe it, but could you force your mind to accept it as truth? Probably not. A God who is omniscient would surely see through a belief that is nothing more than a cynical hedge against hell. It's fire insurance faith, and it feels cheap, unworthy of both a genuine human being and a majestic God. Third, Pascal radically downplays the cost of belief. He presents the life of a believer as a small, finite loss of a few pleasures. But for many, that loss is immense. It can mean surrendering your intellectual autonomy, wrestling with doctrines that seem immoral or illogical, or alienating yourself from a secular world. For a gay person, it might mean a life of celibacy. For a scientist, it might mean a constant, painful cognitive dissonance. To call this a negligible loss is to misunderstand the profound sacrifices faith can demand. But this is where the wager gets deeper. Pascal anticipated these criticisms. He was not naive. To the person who says, "I cannot force myself to believe," Pascal offers chillingly practical advice. Don't start with belief, he says. Start with the actions of a believer. Follow the way by which they began, he advises. By acting as if they believed, taking the holy water, having masses said, etc. Even this will naturally make you believe and deaden your acuteness. It's a kind of spiritual cognitive behavioral therapy. Act the part and your mind will follow. Go through the motions and the feeling will eventually become real. He argues that this process will quiet the intellectual pride and cynical reasoning that stands in the way of faith, allowing a more genuine belief to take root. And this reveals the wager's true purpose. It was never meant to be a standalone, airtight proof delivered from a podium. It was the first step. It was a tool designed for a specific person, the brilliant, rational, worldly skeptic who is too proud to consider faith. The wager is the intellectual shock treatment intended to break their stalemate of indifference. It's meant to grab them by the collar, shake them, and shout. You think this question is irrelevant? Look at the stakes. The consequences of being wrong are infinite. Can you really afford to not even investigate? The wager isn't the end of the conversation. It's the explosive beginning. It's meant to open a door that reason alone has bolted shut. Once that door is cracked open, even just a little by the cold logic of self-preservation, then Pascal hopes the heart can begin to do its work. The arguments from beauty, from love, from personal experience can finally find a foothold. So, where does that leave us here in the 21st century, staring up at our own starry sky? Pascal's wager remains one of the most polarizing and fascinating arguments ever conceived. It is both brilliantly logical and deeply flawed. It is cynical and yet aims for sublime faith. It reduces the divine to a casino chip, and yet it asks us to fundamentally re-examine our entire existence. It doesn't prove there is a God. It doesn't tell us which God to believe in, but it does achieve one thing with terrifying success. It destroys the comfort of casual atheism. It exposes the idea that non-belief is a safe, neutral, default position. It reminds us that to live is to choose, and to choose is to risk. You are embarked. The game is afoot, and the stakes are possibly infinite. Pascal doesn't give you the winning numbers. He just slides the betting slip across the table and fixes you with a stare, forcing you to ask the ultimate pragmatic question. Given the potential outcomes, what is the most rational way to live your life? What will you wager?